Right, well, it's my pleasure to introduce Harfiyah Haleem as our next speaker on science, the environment, and the Quran. Harfiyah is based in London. She's a trustee of the Islamic Foundation for Ecology and Environmental Sciences. She originally studied English at Oxford and more recently did a master's in Middle East Studies at SOAS.
Islamic Societies and Cultures.
Islamic Societies and Cultures at SOAS, University of London. So, Harfiyah, welcome.
So what I'll be doing is looking at what the Quran says about the environment and deducing from that how we're supposed to treat the environment ourselves. Okay, we've all heard, well, some of us have heard several times over that the word ayat, which is the plural, God's signs, are to be, the verses of the Quran are described as God's ayat, the signs of God, pointers towards God. And also the Quran is described as the reading, but it's also the recitation. So you can read it from a page like that, or you can recite it out loud if you know it by heart. Where Muslims are encouraged to learn as much of it by heart as they can, so that it's all part of their consciousness. Now that's not showing up terribly well, is it? It's a bit bright. This is the first few lines of the Quran that were revealed to the Prophet Muhammad in the cave Hira when he was going into retreat in Ramadan. It says Iqra, which also means read, same root as Qur'an, Qara'a, and it says read in the name of your Lord who created. He created man from a clinging form, which is more like a leech in some translations. Read, your Lord is the most bountiful one who taught by the pen, taught men what they didn't know, taught man what he didn't know. So this is the first revelation. The Prophet himself was known to be illiterate. He was a merchant and an orphan. His first reaction to this was, I don't read, I am not somebody who reads. So he was embraced by an angel, according to the story, and squeezed until he had to read and recite what the angel was telling him, and this is how the Quran was revealed to him. So reading and writing are absolutely basic to the Quran, even though the Prophet was as he was. And teaching people what they don't know by use of the pen, learning, this is what just trying to teach robots to do now, is to learn from each other and from their own experience and from being taught. So it's a very important concept. And then you have, as somebody else has said, several people, the book of nature, Allah's creation. And this is one of the verses that points to Allah's creation as a book from which you can read. It's in the creation of the heavens and earth, in the alternation of night and day, in the ships that sail the seas with bounty for people, in the water which God sends down from the sky to give life to the earth when it's been barren, scattering all kinds of creatures over it, in the changes of the winds and the clouds that run their appointed courses between the sky and the earth. There are signs in all these ayat for those who use their minds. And the Quran is full of these quotations, full of these statements, telling you to use your mind, to contemplate, to think. People who have hearts to feel and not just eyes and ears to hear. You are supposed to take in your experience of the world from all your senses. As somebody else was saying this morning, it's a question of experiencing creation, is not just reading from it. Learn from your experience, from all your senses, including your heart. Now the word Al-Khaliq, the creator, appears 239 times in different forms in the Quran, as Khalq and Yakhluqu and things like that, which all from the same root, meaning he created. So it's very insistent that God created everything, the whole universe. Such is Allah, your Lord, the creator of all things. There is no God apart from him. Save him, it says so. And it encourages people to look as hard as they can at everything. This is in Surah 67 Al-Mulk, verses 3 to 4. You will not see any flaw in what the Lord of mercy creates. Look around you. Can you see any flaw? Look again and again. Your looking will come back to you worn out. So all those people we were talking about this morning who said that the atom couldn't be split, we were encouraged to look at the atom a bit harder, and they did split it. So, and the more you look outside, the further you can see, and you find out that the universe is expanding all the time at a huge rate. And however much you look, you're going to end up still looking at the same things but further away. So this is another very important statement. It says, there is not an animal that lives on the earth or a being that flies on its wings but forms parts of communities like you. And this is something, what do you call them, zoologists have only recently decided. They were studying more the communities of animals and how they interact and the pecking orders and all this sort of thing. Studying them as groups instead of putting them in zoos one at a time and letting them get very miserable and bored. Somebody said something about that this morning. Oh, yes, trees. Yes, it was you, Hilary. You said about the trees. I was reading about that too. And they sort of communicate to each other through their roots. There's something else about singing, which I had at the same time. And it says, another quotation I had on this slide is, do you not see the great variety of wonderful things that God has created on this earth? So that is about animal. Anyway, this is Tawheed. Now this is the central core belief of Islam. There is only one God. It says that if there were two or more gods like there are in Greek myth, they would all be fighting each other, and there would be chaos in the world. But the Islamic tenet is there is one God, and He made everything, and you only worship Him and not anybody else. And it's all through the Quran, great emphasis on this. So if anybody, there's a bit I was reading this morning about those who say we take other people as partners to God. Somebody knows this one. It's Surah 39, right near the beginning, and they say we only worship them because they will bring us closer to God. And it says to that, God will judge between them according to their differences, about their differences, but He doesn't guide anyone who's a liar, who covers up or is ungrateful for God's mercy. So it doesn't condemn anyone in particular, could be anybody, and it doesn't say anybody's a liar or whatever. It just says if they do lie, then that's the result. They don't get guidance from God. So only person or only thing you can worship is God Himself. And then it goes on to describe some of the miraculous, not miraculous, but immense creations. So the day and the night winding themselves around each other, which is one of the images that is picked up by the Tafsir al-Ilmi, saying that it's a very good description about how night and day wind themselves round the surface of the earth. It's the word is kawir, yes, which is like winding a turban or spinning a ball or something like that. So it goes both. God is the highest you can imagine. We still have no measure of His greatness, and how I had a lovely picture behind this of the Horsehead Nebula, which was taken by the Hubble telescope, and asking people to imagine how huge they are, and that each of these little pinballs of light is a new galaxy being formed. And we have to conceive of God as so immense that He can create those things as well as the ant and the atom and all the bits of the atom. So we have to, He's so much higher than anything else we could possibly worship. That's all. The only choice we have is to worship Him. And it says so many times, everything in the heavens and earth belongs to Him, 22 times. Everything in the heavens and earth glorifies him. That's what I was talking to Dr. Ernest this morning. All the animals have their own way of praising God, and we don't understand it because we don't know enough about them. Not just the animals, but the trees and the plants and everything else. He knows everything that's in the heavens and earth. He made it. He knows it. He has an immense amount of knowledge you can't hardly conceive of. And I'll come to that at the end of the slideshow. Everything in the heavens and earth submits to him. I think I've got another slide about that. And he has tamed. Sakhara. Sakhara is the word for tamed. It's not subdued. We decided it was more like making things usable or making things of service to people. He has tamed animals so that we can use them. He's tamed the sea and the wind so that we can use them to go on the sea and sail ships. And if he chooses to, and if we behave badly enough, he can punish us by means of those same things by not taming them. So if you get like Noah's flood, it's just water. As I saw a film the other day saying, it was a Robin Williams film about a game called something beginning with J, I can't remember that. And they had picked a card and it said monsoon, and it's a bit of rain. But then they had masses of water flooding through the house and washing everything away, knocking everything down. So if Allah chooses to punish us with water, he can do that. And he can make the water sink into the earth and become bitter. So what would you do if he did that? That's the end of Surah Al-Mulk. He can, he's tamed the fire for you in the trees. He's made it possible for you to make fire out of green trees, but he can punish you with great forest fires if you don't do the right things. Now this is another concept. Okay, and that's what means there is not a thing whose storehouses are not with us, God. We send it down only according to a well-defined measure. We send the winds to fertilize, and we bring down water from the sky for you to drink. You do not control its sources. And there's several verses like that. Think about something small, like a seed that you have in your hand and you sow it. Do you make it grow, or does God? And it's constantly challenging people and speaking to them about how they relate to God's creation. So Qadr is a measure, and it says in that everything is measured according to God's provision, and it's all in a balance. This one is the crucial verse about Mizan, relating to the environment, because starts with the sky and the sun and the moon following their calculated courses. That's also in Surah 39, and Zumar says he has tamed the sun and the moon, and they've run in their for an appointed term, it says there, so that they're not permanent. They might disappear when God chooses. It says the same thing for human beings. If some people, they're made to grow old, but some people get called away before they get old, and that they will reach their appointed term. So it's the same with the moon and the sun. And the plants and the trees submit to his designs. He has lifted up the sky, and the word canopy is used to translate in some of these descriptions of the sky. And but it does. We've been having long debates about climate skeptics as to what the sky does and doesn't do, and whether it can reflect radiation back down to the earth, or whether it is totally useless from that point of view, or whether it there's a water vapor and carbon dioxide, which is a big issue at the moment with climate change. I've been discussing all this with a non-Muslim climate skeptic who doesn't believe the globe is being warmed, not by climate change anyway, not by carbon dioxide trapping heat. As I had another physicist from Imperial College said, yes, it was carbon dioxide, and it has special properties that make it trap the heat. Anyway, there's a lot of debate about that, but the sky in the Qur'an is described as a canopy, and it's built above us in 7 layers. So there are various layers of the atmosphere as have been coming clear from the science and people going up in the atmosphere and finding the layers. And the balance, after the sky, it goes to the balance. He has set the balance for you not to exceed it. Weigh with justice. It's part of our responsibility to act and weigh with justice. Although Allah is in control of everything, we have a responsibility to maintain a scale and a balance by acting with justice ourselves. And the other 2 or 3 places that this mizan word appears, it's about justice and weighing and measuring goods in the marketplace. So it means that sort of weighing as well. And don't fall short in the balance. Don't go too far, and don't be too stingy. He laid down the earth for his creatures. Now we get down to the earth with its fruits, its palm trees with sheathed clusters, its husked grain, its fragrant plants, right down on the ground. Which then of your Lord's gifts you both deny? And this whole surah has this chorus going in on the bottom, a refrain. Which then of your Lord's gifts do you both deny? And both is addressed to men and unseen creatures, jinn, which can be anything you can't see, like a germ or even an angel or God even. So a jinn is a hidden creature, which human beings have only limited perception faculties, so they can only see a limited number of colours, and they can only see or hear a limited number of sounds, and smell a limited number of smells. Other animals have much greater senses of perception in all sorts of different areas. I won't go into that here, but if you want to ask about that, I can talk about that later. Now, Islam, the word Islam means submission. It's also derived from the word peace, salam. And when somebody becomes a Muslim, they have to submit to the will of God. So that is the essence of what Islam is all about. This is why Abraham is a very important prophet in Islam, because he submitted to God to the extent that he was willing to follow God's instructions, even to kill his own son, although he was spared from having to do that. And the Hajj ritual is built all around submission on Ibrahim and his family. But Allah says again here, do you not realize, Prophet, that everything in the heavens and earth submits to God, the sun, the moon, the stars, the mountains, the trees, and the animals, and so do many human beings, not all of them. Though for many others, torment or punishment is due. So we are not any better than the animals, in other words. So they are much better Muslims than we are as a whole. Now this is a very thorny issue. Talked about stewardship already, and this is the word that the Muslims translate as stewardship, khilafa. It comes from the root khalf, khalf meaning behind. So the followers of the Prophet, the successors of the Prophet, that's what it means. The successors of the Prophet were the khulafa, the caliphs. And it means successor first, and it means deputy second. And the first mention of it is in Surah 230, where it's talking about Adam, the first human. And God says to the angels, who were the only people around to talk to at the time, I am putting a successor, Khalifa, on the earth. They said, how can you put someone who will cause damage and bloodshed there? He said, I know what you don't know. So this is God created us knowing what we could do, and how badly we treat the earth. But he knows something we don't know. It might come clearer what he knows as we go along. Sometimes this word is translated as vicegerent, as a deputy ruler, and the most often is used by the Qur'an talking about successors of peoples succeeding other peoples if they misbehave. So have you considered that God created the heavens and earth for a purpose? He could remove all of you and replace you with a new creation if he wished. That's not difficult for God. And it says in other places, the creation of the heavens and earth is greater than the creation of human beings, but most people don't know that. It is he who made you successors on the earth, raises some of you above others in rank to test you through what he gives you. So you can be tested with having great wealth, and you can be tested by having poverty or going through suffering. There's all sorts of things. Life is a test. Surah Al-Mulk starts with, he made life and death to test which of you is the best in something behavior. So it's all about testing us. And the earth belongs to God. He gives it as an inheritance to whichever of his servants he chooses. And the happy future belongs to those who are mindful of him. This is the word taqwa, mutaqin, the ones who are aware of God, people who are aware and take note of what he says and follow his guidance. There's another way it's used as a verb here. Moses to his brother Aaron, when he goes up the mountain, he says, take my place, akhlifni, among my people, and act rightly, and do not follow the way of those who spread corruption. And what did they do? They spread corruption and started worshipping the calf. So, his power over us is absolute. If he wants to wipe us out, no problem. The other thing that takes into account the stupidity and foolishness of man is that God offered the trust to the heavens, and the trust is not specified. The translation we have is the trust of moral responsibility. That's one possibility. We offer the trust to the heavens, the earth, and the mountains, yet they refused to undertake it and were afraid of it. Mankind undertook it, and they have always been very inept and rash. So, although the Qur'an says in some places we have honoured the children of Adam above many of our creations, it also recognises that they are very stupid and rash and do things without thinking. So there's a bit about it being honoured. We have honoured the children of Adam and carried them by land and sea. We have provided you with good sustenance provided good sustenance for them and favoured them specially among many of those we have created. Note, speaking about humans in the third person there, just distancing them from what God is saying. So when he wants to talk to them, he will talk to them directly and say, you. And he gives you provision. We have to be grateful to God that he gives us all the things that we need to eat and drink and everything else that we need. And who is it that gives you provision from the heavens and earth? Is it another God beside God? Say, show me your evidence then if what you say is true. So everything comes from the earth by Allah's will, but only if we live according to his will can we expect him to continue to provide for us. So if we continue to behave arrogantly on the earth and corrupt it in all directions, the food will just dry up. It's already drying up. The seas are becoming less full of fish because we've overfished them and filled them with rubbish, plastics and radioactive waste from Fukushima power station explosion, and the forest fires and ruining crops and burning people's homes, and there are droughts, a huge drought in East Africa. So 22 million people starving, on the brink of starvation, according to Oxfam. And another drought, and I think it was in East Africa, I just heard about as well. West Africa, yes. And there have been droughts in Australia, someone was saying, and even in this country there was drought in the Lake District followed by huge floods. So if we don't behave as we should, and we aren't behaving as we should, this will continue to happen. Now riba is at the root of our excessive use of this world's resources, because riba which is extremely powerfully forbidden in the Qur'an, as opposed to giving charity, which is the opposite. Riba is making us overexploit not only the planet's resources, but our people, everything else, to try and pay off imaginary debts caused by usury. Islamic economics forbids usury or interest, so that the debts do not increase artificially and you get them paid off much more quickly. And the people are cutting down forests and overfishing and doing all sorts of things, doing mass agriculture and ruining the land because they don't put anything back into it, and all in pursuit of paying off these debts caused by usury, which is a non-existent thing. Zakat, on the other hand, is to share everything with the poorer people, the less fortunate. It's one of the 5 pillars of Islam, and we are encouraged to give at least 2.5% of our monetary wealth, and there are various different proportions for land and animals depending on how you're farming. But if you have anything that's more than 12 months old, you're supposed to clear out your cupboards and give it away to somebody or give it in charity. So if we share all the things that we have amongst people fairly, then there wouldn't be the same problems of overexploitation and wasting things that we could use again. We have this interest-free loan system in Islam called Qard Hasan, and it's a loan to God. It's put in the Quran as a loan to God. So if you give somebody an interest-free loan, that's like charity. You don't expect it back, but if you get it back, fine. You only give what you can spare. If you give more than you can spare, you can be accused of being prodigal and wasting your wealth. Some people accuse one of being prodigal, even if we're not wasting one's wealth, but never mind. As there's an organisation called Akhuwat in Pakistan. I don't know if anybody's heard of it. It runs on, it's a microfinance project, and it lends money to people, small amounts of money to people without interest, and they get 97% of their loan paid back within a year or so. And the money recirculates amongst the poor people, and lots and lots of people are helped with it. It's growing exponentially at the moment. But that is the only Islamic organisation I know that's doing that. There was another one started by Muhammad Yunus, which I can't remember the name of at the moment, but that was giving money to poor people, but some of them started charging lots of interest on it, so it was not as effective as this one, and it got a bad name. And also there's a very important teaching that if people can't pay, we don't have to chase them up and threaten them and take away their possessions, and you give them more time until they can pay you, which is something we could do with learning in this country. There's all these television programs about can't pay, we'll take it away. You seen that one? The people have not paying or won't pay. Now this is the quotation about corruption appearing on the land and sea. That's corruption has appeared on the land and sea as a result of people's actions to make them taste the consequences of some of their own actions so that they may turn back. Now turn back could mean turn back to God, could mean turn back and amend what they've been doing before and realise what they've been doing and stop it and try to make things, put things right. Putting things right is a very important concept in Islamic law. Aslaha is the verb, I think, and it's also used for reform, but I think putting things right is a very important concept in Islamic law, and arbitration is making peace between people by putting right the situation that caused the breach in the first place. And if you do something wrong and steal something, then the remedy is to give the money back and to make friends with the people who you stole it from. And if you kill somebody, the people whose family of the person you killed has the right to ask for your life, but they also are encouraged not to take the person's life, but to take monetary compensation. And they call the Qur'an calls the murderer your brother. So it's trying to make things better between the two injured parties. And the Prophet himself, peace be upon him, he was a very great arbitrator. It showed early on in his life where they were trying to rebuild the Kaaba, as they do periodically, and the tribes were arguing about who's going to put the black stone in place, which is a meteorite that forms part of the Kaaba. And he came along and he put his cloak on the ground, and he asked each of the tribes to take on a bit of the edge, and they all lifted it into place, and he put it on the actual place himself. So that was a way he made peace between all the tribes. And he made a very important peace treaty with Meccan enemies called the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, which didn't really please the Muslims who were with him, but it gave him a period of peace when his teachings were heard much more throughout the land, and thousands of people became Muslims, including his worst enemy. Now this is Muhit. In the book I have on the table, there's an essay by Sayyid Hussein Nasr, and he points out that this is one of the qualities of God himself. And the word environment means the surroundings. It's a French word, environ, which means the surroundings. And the Quran teaches in several places that God, he also uses the word wasiya. He surrounds or encompasses everything. So Sayyid Hussein Nasr puts it to us that if we injure our environment, we are actually injuring God, because God is all around us and he created everything, so it's all part of him. To God belongs everything in the heavens and the earth yet again, and God was always surrounding everything. Kana muhit. It's always been around, surrounding everything. And this is my final slide. I hope I haven't finished too soon. This is a very important verse which a lot of people have on their walls in Arabic. It's part of Surah 255. I think the one after it is the one that says there's no compulsion in religion. 256. God, there is no God but him, the ever-living, the ever-watchful. Neither slumber nor sleep overtakes him, like it does some people, I mean. All that is in the heavens and in the earth belongs to him. Who is there that can intercede with him except by his leave? I had a long argument with a Christian Catholic about this, but nobody is allowed to intercede with God except with God's permission. He knows what is before them and what's behind them, but they do not comprehend anything. La yuhituna, same word as muhit, anything of his knowledge except what he wills. His throne extends over the heavens and the earth. It does not weary him to preserve them both. He is the Most High, the Tremendous. So that we might find out an awful lot of stuff, but like I said in the beginning, however hard we look, we will never get anywhere near what God knows about everything. In the previous version of this, I had a slide about space travel. It says, if you can penetrate the heavens, do so, but you will not do it without his permission. And if you do, a fire will pursue you, fire and smoke or something. And then had a picture of a space capsule descending to Earth with a great big long tail of flame coming from it, where it's suffering from the friction in the atmosphere. So this is what the Quran says about science, and it encourages you to practice science, encourages you to seek knowledge. As a hadith I was saying to somebody yesterday, knowledge is the lost property of the Muslim. Wherever he finds it, he should pick it up. So that's the hadith, the saying of the Prophet. So we are encouraged to do science, to learn things from nature, to make use of the things we learn, but not to exceed the balance and not to fall short in the balance. Do what we can, but do not be excessive or arrogant or demanding. Because one of the things that is said of Jesus and John the Baptist in the Qur'an is that they were, as children, they were not demanding or domineering of their mothers. This is a sign of taghut, which is tyranny, and they were very heavily condemned in the Qur'an in various forms. Is that all right? How much time have we got left?
We can move to Q&A. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Right, great. Thank you very much, Harfiyah. Lots of thought-provoking stuff. Any questions? There's one here.
I was wondering what Islam would make of natural evil. So
Natural?
With evil. So
Evil.
earthquakes and so on with
Earthquakes
the
are part of the punishments that God inflicts on people if they misbehave.
Oh.
So it's one of the tribes of Arabia, I think. Thamud, yes. They were a Nabatean tribe that carved caves out of the rocks, like in Petra in Jordan. There's another place called Al-Hijr in Arabia, I think. And they were so, according to the story in the Quran, they were so arrogant they refused to follow the bidding of God through his prophet Salih, I think it was, who there was a camel. He sent a she-camel and he said, let her share the water. And they didn't. It says, when the worst of them rose to power in the land, but in brackets, they refused to follow. Can you say that? Because I can't remember it. Akaruha. They hamstrung her, cut her hamstrings, and left her to die. And that was when the earthquake happened, because they ignored God's command. And this is very controversial, but it is the way the Quran deals with these things. Some people say, well, in these natural disasters, as we look at them now, lots of people are killed, not just the people who sin. That is something we have to think about. And also, disaster management experts say that the people who die are usually the poor people because their houses are built so badly that they die. So I always think 2 or 3 times when I hear these stories in the Quran. But that's what the explanation is in the Quran if we have these disasters. Also, God gives us trials, I said before, to test how we behave. So if there's a disaster in your area and you just leave everybody to die and go off, then you're as different from if you go and help and start digging people up and looking after them. And so it's up to each person to make their own response to disasters.
Okay, so with regards to the world being created specifically for us, and there being
It doesn't say for us. No.
Oh, okay.
It says that God tamed things for us, that we can use them. That's a great gift of God to us.
Okay.
But if we misbehave, he can untame them again.
Okay, I thought it was in a previous presentation, but either way, so for example, with say poisonous plants and animals, snakes, and so on, what would be the interpretation of those things?
Well, they're all parts of God's creation, so we have to learn to live with them and deal with them as we can. I was talking to my granddaughter and daughter yesterday about a National Geographic article called Mind Suckers. I think it's quite a recent one, about horrible parasites that get inside animals' brains and make them do things they wouldn't normally do, like climb up trees or dive into ponds. And then they facilitate the breeding cycle of the parasite by putting them into the next stage where they can carry on their development. It's a very fascinating subject, It's horrible, but fascinating. And apparently they inject things into the brain of these creatures so that they just follow what they're told to do in a daze. And maybe they like it. We never know. But this is God's creation, and He's given. There's so much in His creation. You can never get to the bottom of it all and find out everything about it. But the more we see, the more we learn, the more we can apply that knowledge to other things.
Okay. Thank you.
Bruno has a question.
Thank you for this fascinating talk. And I would like to ask, out of lack of understanding, actually, but interest in, you mentioned before this concept of surrounding and the environment. And then when they're with the throne of God, or where the God that God who extends His control over heaven and earth. I would like to ask, in understanding of Islam, where is God's dwelling place?
God is everywhere.
Everywhere. And everywhere. So there's not a specific. So what's the relationship with the environment? So how do you draw? Is that obvious? There must be a distinction between God's dwelling place and the environment, or you don't do this distinction at all?
God, according to all the philosophers this morning, God was there before the Big Bang or whatever started the universe, and there is a description of a Big Bang in the Qur'an, and how He brought the earth and the sky together, and they said come together willingly or not, and they said we will obey and come together. So there's all sorts of descriptions which the Tafsir Ilmi has brought up to the surface about that, much more accurate, or more like modern science, as they say, which, as somebody else said this morning, is not really a good measurement, because modern science and previous science, they're all changing all the time. So we can't measure the Quran by modern science. We have to measure the science by the Quran. Yes, you were saying, sorry.
No. Yeah, we definitely answer this idea of where what's the relationship between God and the environment, as you think about. There's this, I like the word surrounding, but yeah, you definitely answer. Thank you.
Okay.
I think there's one right next to Bruno.
Isn't it?
Yeah, I have a question for the resource. So I'm not very clear about the Quran tradition. Do you have some specific management about natural resource?
There are things in the fiqh.
In the origin area of Quran tradition, the water is limited, and now we are in. We need to face the shortage of water, shortage of some natural resource. So I want to understand, or you can give me some.
There was a very good paper written on Islamic management of water by someone called Jayusi and a couple of other people, which is still available on the internet as PDF, I think. The principle of zakat sharing is very strong, and there's also a right to people to drink water. So you're not allowed to refuse people a drink of water, and or make it impossible for them getting a drink of water. If you have a well, you're allowed to own a well, but you have to share it with other people. And there's also a system of opening the waterways for a short time to let somebody have water, and then somebody else to have it for a long time. So everyone takes turns. So these are the two principles of sharing, are sharing physically the water, giving it to other people, or taking turns. So I'm telling sort of 3-year-old how to share a bike in the play group. My daughter spent a long time trying to do that. And those are the two main principles. So you take turns, or you...
So there is a good tradition in Quran to teach the people how to share the resource.
Yeah,
so
and in the fiqh as well, in the law that's developed from that.
Yeah, we Chinese people admire the Muslim tradition about the money. They
sharing the money.
Yeah, share the money. The rich people will get the money, or not give them money, lend money to the poor people who want, and wait for them a long time when they can return.
And it happens
So-
within families as well. You can lend money
Yeah.
to your relatives, and you can build up quite a large empire of property by doing that, as the Pakistanis have done in this country.
And they have a good credit,
Yeah,
for in the market area. And thank you.
that's good. No,
The lady by the window.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That was really interesting. If you are looking at publications, whether it's on the web or in papers, written by Muslims about environmental care, are there any particular parts of the Quran, those passages that you surveyed, are there any sort of highlight ones that come up again and again that get used a lot, that referred to a lot?
well, there are, but there are so many more as well.
Oh, right, okay, yes.
But I did put a book list out yesterday. There's only left. It's a very long book list which I've been making for many years on all the books I can find about Islamic and Islam and the environment. Which you
So
can
they
see
would
what
all
those-
draw on quite a wide variety of different passages
They
from
do
the
tend
Quran.
to keep repeating the same ones, but there are lots of other ones as well.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
I think the gentleman at the front here.
Somebody at the back's got a microphone.
We'll come back to you, Roy.
The surahs that you've actually put up and have given an indication of relationship of God with creation. How does that work out in terms of environmental care, in terms of practice, so that things like CO2 reduction and things like that, how are those verses then translated into action?
Oh, there's a
on the
book in
ground?
the other room called Muslim Green Guide to Reducing Climate Change. It's got all sorts of climate actions you can do, and the scriptures that encourage that to be done. It's all the Muslims tend to regard climate change as being the West's fault, and it's not them. But as Sayyid Hussein Nasr says in his book, The Need for a Sacred Science, it's very good to read. It's something that they've adopted wholesale themselves since the colonial period as well, the way that we Westerners treat the earth. Whereas before that, they had very healthy traditions of not wasting stuff and sharing and being frugal and living close to the productivity of the earth. I read a book once, which I did review in the Muslim World Book Review. It's about Spain and Morocco and the different ways of living in the both of them, and how they contrast between the Moroccans, because they hardly used their footprint was extremely small, their carbon footprint and everything else footprint, whereas the Spanish were following a prodigal Western lifestyle and making huge carbon footprints. So a lot of Muslims resent being told by the West to reduce their carbon footprint, because they're already much smaller than the West, and they're too poor to increase it anyway. So, yes, we've as IFES, we've been going into mosques and teaching people about the Islamic injunctions and the hadith and everything that help them do the right thing. We have a khutbah notes which we give to the imam, and the imam uses them to compile his khutbah on a subject like, say, climate change or energy, sustainable energy, or sustainable living more generally, or water, or I think there's about 6 of them now. And other people are getting the idea as well in different parts of the world. There's an American website called Khalifa, which has a lot of khutbahs on it, and quite a few other people are taking that up now, which is a very good way for Muslims to learn, because they all have to go to the mosque, the men anyway, to go to the mosque on Friday and listen to a khutbah of one kind or another. And it's helpful for the imam to be able to teach them these things. We have also got the Islamic Declaration on Global Climate Change at the back there, a few copies. And you can also see it on the IFES website, ifes.org.uk. It's got a global declaration on it. It was compiled by an international group of Muslim scholars, including muftis and faqihs and all sorts of people, and professors at university. And that was launched in Istanbul in 2015, just before the Paris meeting, when the Pope's encyclical was also put before the international community, and the faith groups were recognised at last as having a very important role to play in teaching people how they should treat the earth and how to respect God's creation. So we have that, and we've translated it into now 9 languages, and we're hoping to get it into every mosque in the world somehow. But if anyone has any suggestion how we can do that, that would be very helpful. But it's on the website anyway. So we attended, some of us attended the Paris COP, and some of us attended the Marrakesh COP. We've got a new organisation in this country called Muslim Climate Action, which is it's originally 5 different Muslim organisations, including aid agencies like Islamic Relief, who very kindly sponsored the conference in Istanbul. And then they've got another half a dozen members joined us since then. So we're trying to spread our influence in the Muslim community and put the Muslim point of view out to other people.
Just going back to the question at the beginning there about the earth having been, well, was the earth created for humankind? And you responded that it was tamed for humankind.
It's not forced into submission, but it was, God made it tame for us that we use. Yeah.
So does that have implications on an Islamic theology of the environment then? If the earth wasn't made for us?
I don't know how far that's reached into Islamic environmentalism yet, but it's there in the Qur'an, so it's probably imbuing our thoughts on the subject. So, was it said to Adam, go out and cultivate the garden, wasn't it, or something like that in Genesis? But we weren't told to go out and cultivate the garden in the Qur'an. We're just told to treat it with respect and keep the balance, and not
subdue it.
Not be excessive in our demands on it, and not be too stingy in the way that we treat it. So we have to give it food. And if we do in a garden, you have to give your plants food, as I discovered after many years. So, and if you give away too much charity, you're warned not to do that, because you will get blamed for becoming indigent yourself, so, and not looking after your responsibility. So it's all a matter of balance.
Thanks. I think Roy had a question.
Yeah, I mean, this may turn out to be a bit off topic, but you did mention the fact that the Quran has various things about how we should treat each other. For example, it forbids usury, and you did touch on sort of what happens if somebody's killed by somebody else and so on. And I was just wondering, because, I mean, I'm totally ignorant on this, where the whole business of Sharia law comes from, in the sense that obviously it's, I mean, the Western media image of it is quite sensationalist and barbaric, as I'm sure you'll agree. And I just wondered whether you could sort of try and,
my husband, Professor Abdul Haleem, has just published his latest book on exploring the Quran, and there's an article in that on the Sharia, legal language in the Sharia, and how these punishments, they're called hudud punishments. I'm sure everybody's heard of hudud punishments. The ones where you cut off people's hands, and it's even still got crucifixion, as it was, the Quran was revealed at the time the Romans were still in power and still crucifying people. But the Quran gives that as the limit. The hudud is the limit. You can't go any further than that. And it also says if they repent before they're caught, then you haven't got any way against them. It says that in lots of different places to other crimes as well. And it gives all sorts of loopholes that you can get out of it, of punishing people with those punishments. You've got something called ta'zir, which is discretionary punishment, and that all depends on how the judges interpret the law, or how they decide what punishment is suitable for the crime. So it's very much less dogmatic and harsh than what it sounds. And also the propaganda against Islam has been going on for centuries, and if you look at some of the things they've been saying, you realise how much of it is total nonsense.
Harfiyah, what's the environmental content of the Sharia?
Oh, right. Yes, we have. Second successor of Prophet Muhammad, the Caliph Omar ibn al-Khattab, appointed a woman as a market manager, muhtasiba, and the whole system of the environment is dealt with under the muhtasib, which is reckoning. That legislation, that section of the Sharia. So that's again to do with justice and not exceeding, not putting the prices too high or too low, and weighing properly. There's a whole surah of the Qur'an about people who don't weigh fairly in the marketplace. Yes, there is a whole system of hima, where the animals have a piece of land allocated to them so they can feed properly. It was originally a pre-Islamic custom where the king or the chief of the tribe would have a special piece of land for his horses, and it was allocated then to the Islamic State for their horses, and they've been using it to make nature reserves in Saudi Arabia and other places. And there's also protection for water courses. There's a harim, I think it is, around the water courses and the wells, which people are not allowed to pollute and not allowed to grow anything on. They have to be kept clean for the river. That's two of the things, or three of the things. It says in the Sharia, the right to drink is another one. Is enforceable on people if they can be prosecuted if they refuse people drinks of water, and so on and so forth, and the sharing of water. And okay, there's probably more. There's one. Not cutting the trees. Not cutting trees. Yes, that was something the Jews accused the Muslims of doing when they had to subdue the opposition, because the Jews have also got protections on trees. But the first Caliph, he was saying about going into battles, you shouldn't cut trees, you should not kill anybody who's not fighting, you should spare anyone who's a religious person, religious leader, don't kill women and children, all this. There's a whole long speech about that from Abu Bakr, the first Caliph. Cutting trees, and I did a whole presentation on trees in the Quran and Hadith, and ended up with the trees in the Quran because couldn't fit the Hadith in so much stuff. There are protections for not cutting down trees that give shade or give fruit, and there are lots of images of trees in the Quran for various purposes. It's like one of the person of good faith is like a firmly rooted tree. He bears good fruit, and so on. And the other one who doesn't believe and has not got faith will be easily uprooted and cast aside.
Does that have a biblical parallel? Yeah. Hilary, you had a question.
Well, yes, my question is, and this, I've come across just a very small minority of people in the Christian tradition whose attitude to environment is, well, God's in control, it's God's earth, he can do what he like, it's not our problem, we'll leave God to sort it out.
People like that as well.
And I just was going to ask if that is
in our house.
Prevalent in Islam, and what your response is to that.
The sort of attitude that the Quran condemns to a large extent, and it definitely puts the responsibility of Khilafah on people to take responsibility for what they do in the world. And
do you think that's just an opt-out?
I think it's a chicken out,
yes,
cop out, yes, quite frankly. God doesn't want us to. Oh, that's right. The surah I'm just learning, 39. It says, God doesn't mind if you don't believe in Him. He has no need of you. He's quite rich enough without you. But He doesn't like it if you're ungrateful. But if you are grateful and if you give thanks to Him and do what He tells you, then if you take notice of Him, mutakun, it is there, then He likes it. He's pleased with it. And I can't remember what this next bit is. He will give you people who are like that, unstinting reward anyway. That's further down in this. Yeah. If you're grateful, He will give you unstinting rewards. So God doesn't mind if you don't take any notice of Him. It's up to you. But in the next life, you'll find out what you've been doing. He will tell you what you've done, and you will suffer for it. You'll be in the fire. And the fire seems to me, I don't know if anybody else, is the regret that you didn't do what you were supposed to do, and you realise what that effect that had. It's like a fire burning inside you, because you wish you could go back and do it better again. It says that in several places. They will ask, why can we go back and change what we've been doing and do the right thing again? And God says, no, sorry, it's too late.
Are there any more questions? Eleanor?
Yeah, I want to ask it. Can I go back to the natural evil question? Just listening, it sounds like God is quite you've done something wrong, that's bad. We also have a research project at the Faraday Institute, and I think they say there's no such thing as a natural disaster, it's human disasters. Because, I was just thinking about the people in Haiti or the tsunami, and that it's a lot of poor people who, maybe due to corruption or bad building or whatever, who die. I just wonder, to me, when listening to your answer about punishment for doing wrong, I wonder what these people did wrong. I'm not saying I'm not happy with your answer. It just made me think that
as I said, it depends on the person whether they are punished in the next life or not. If they're killed by a natural disaster, if they were good people, they might go straight to heaven, and they would benefit from the disaster. But if they were wicked people, they would realise what terrible thing they've done and why they built this place so badly just to get a quick buck, and all these people who got killed, they would regret that they hadn't done the right thing. So that would be like the fire for them. So it depends on the people in this life. This life is not everything, and the Qur'an makes very clear that this life is not everything. It's the afterlife that counts.
I think something that I've heard that seems to balance the explanation for suffering and natural evil from the Islamic point of view and Christian faith is, I think, somebody by the names of Tim Keller, who, after giving so many other explanations, tries to point to the aspect of the fall. And when there was the fall, we got separated from the Eden-like, the paradise-like love and relationship with God. And as long as we're still in this world, we still sort of have an aspect of suffering that is beyond some of our explanations. We have not been, should I say, totally restored to the paradise-like relationship. And so things like the tsunami, that aspect of massive natural evil happening that we cannot attach to our individual actions, would probably still reflect the aspect of we having lost that paradise relationship. Although I raise the question against that and say, then what happened in the atonement when Christ brings us back to the relationship with God? I don't know what the rest of the other people in here would want to say about that. Thank you.
Harfiyah, would you like to comment?
Okay, well, the fall does appear in the Quran, but it's described quite somewhat differently. I noticed somebody this morning almost conflated the serpent with Eve as being the source of all evil. It doesn't say that in the Quran. It says they both ate the fruit. It doesn't say the woman induced Adam to eat it. And there's a lot about Satan. Satan in the Quran is described as not bowing down to Adam when he was told to by God. From which the command to bow down was addressed to the angels, but some people somewhere have made from that description Satan as an angel who fell because of his pride. Actually, is described elsewhere as a jinn, which is an unseen being made of smokeless fire. So it's all rather difficult to reconcile the two descriptions, although jinn can apply to angels as well, say unseen, like all the other things that are jinn. So Adam and Eve fell, and they were expelled from the garden, but they repented. God sent them words of repentance, and they repented. So there's no original sin involved in the Quran. So that's cannot be invoked to describe natural evil in Islam. But as I said before, there are trials that God sends to us that we have to deal with and show how our mettle by the way we deal with them.